Hello, everybody. Welcome to another edition of the Music, Money, and Life podcast. This podcast is, as always, is brought to you by howtolicenseyourmusic.com. That is my website, and if you go there, you'll find a ton of free and premium resources all about how to license your music in television shows, films, video games, advertisements, and so on. Today I have a special guest. I have Gregory Douglas with me. Gregory is a Burlington, Vermont-based singer-songwriter who also runs a website called the CreativeAdvisor.com, which is a really great resource for musicians. Gregory has a ton of interviews with other musicians and different sorts of music business oriented career advice. So we're gonna get into that, but first, Gregory, how are you doing?
I'm great. Thanks for having me, Aaron.
Thanks for doing this with me. I really appreciate you coming on the podcast today. So you're based out of Burlington. How long have you lived there?
Well, I was born and raised here in Vermont, actually, this small town Vermont, but I went away for high school, actually, college prep school for the last 3 years of high school, and decided not to go to college. So, figured I'd just jump right into the world of independent music, and I figured Burlington would be a great launching point, and it really was. And the more I toured around, the more I really appreciated where I'm from. So I haven't really left. I've left quite a bit to tour, but I've always wanted to come back home to my cozy bubble.
Yeah, I've never been to Burlington. I've actually never been to Vermont, but I've heard a lot about Burlington. I know it has a pretty thriving scene. I know that the band Fish is from Burlington. Do you ever see those guys running around town? Or I guess maybe they've a couple of them have moved away at this point, huh?
Yeah, but you definitely see those guys around town quite a bit. And Grace Potter and the Nocturnals are based here.
Yeah, and, she's awesome too.
Yeah, it's surprisingly vibrant music scene here, and also everyone's pretty chill, So
yeah.
It's people walk around, even celebrities. I think more celebrities are buying homes in the greater Burlington area, on the lake and stuff like that. And you see them walking around downtown on Church Street and stuff, and nobody bothers them. Everyone's just kind of, pretty chill.
Yeah,
so that's nice.
Yeah, that's cool. How big is Burlington population wise?
Oh, geez.
Do you have a ballpark?
That's a very good question. I don't have a ballpark. I think I take it for granted just living here.
But it's a fairly small city, right? It's not a
exactly
metropolitan size city, right? It's I'm guessing a couple 100,000 or so would be my guess. I really have no idea.
Yeah, I even wonder if it's actually less. But yeah, you're right. It's pretty small, but again, surprising how much there is to do, culturally and musically, as well as the restaurant scene. It's a very progressive farm to table mentality here. So we just have tons of amazing restaurants with local ingredients, and just a lot for how small of a town it is. So I do feel pretty lucky to live here.
Cool. Yeah, I would love to make it up there at some point just to visit. But Gregory, what I thought we would do is I would like if you could kind of give us a little bit of information about your background so my listeners know exactly who it is I'm talking to. And then I want to get into discussing your website, thecreativeadvisor.com, and get into some of the great career-oriented advice that you have.
Absolutely. Well, I've been doing this since high school, like I mentioned, and I decided not to go to college just because it was the independent music scene was quite the promised land at the time, and at least for me, artists like Ani DeFranco were really paving the way, and so I felt like I wanted to jump into that, and I did, and I've been full time ever since. So it's been a little over a decade of doing this, and I've toured quite a bit all around. but I've also kind of reached a point in my life now where I'm trying to be a little bit more selective, not touring around quite as extensively, but also because I realized over the years how rapidly the industry is changing and what few resources there really are available for artists, across the board, not just independent artists, but even artists that have been with big labels and are considering going independent or newly independent and just as clueless as emerging artists as to how to really sustain and develop their own careers. So, and I feel like after a decade of doing this myself and seeing a lot of the things that I was doing on my own become more mainstream in general, or at least more of the default for a lot of artists, I really wanted to do more with that and be more productive with my frustrations with the industry and start to really help other artists and educate other artists, but also educate the public, because I think in many ways the public is not really aware of all these changes that are happening behind the scenes, and I think that they would really be all the more willing. They're willing and wanting to support the music they love. They just don't know what they need to do. So I think it's important across the board, this type of education. And so that kind of was the launching point for the creativeadvisor.com. And so I feel like I have a nice balance of both worlds these days. So I'm really thrilled to be doing all this now.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. Yeah, it seems like the music industry is obviously is in a period of transition that it really feels like for the last 5 to even 10 years there's been this change in the music industry, and it kind of seems to me, I get this sense that a few years ago, when the internet started getting more and more widespread, and now pretty much everyone has access to high-speed internet, it seemed like there was this opportunity for independent musicians to kind of bypass and cut out the middleman and do things themselves. And certainly a lot of musicians have been doing that, but it still seems very mysterious, right? It seems like even mainstream acts are still kind of trying to figure out how to adapt to the new music business model. And obviously touring and playing live shows is an important revenue stream for most acts. What do you advise independent musicians do in order to make a living in 2013, going into 2014? Do you have some kind of specific advice we can get into?
Well, I think that's a really good point. There is still a real air of mystery across the board. And, I don't think that anyone really has the answers, but I do know that the way the music industry is evolving in general is parallel to the way business across the board is evolving. And I think that even major corporations are having to adjust to a new world of online marketing and a new world of how advertising is changing and how consumerism is changing. And the root of all this is the internet and what a game changer it's been. And really, in the grand scheme of things, the internet is still in its infancy. And I think that it's good to take a giant step back and keep that perspective about things. So I would say that it's really important for musicians. It's just as important for musicians to consider themselves their own brand. I mean, you are essentially your own product, whether you are comfortable with the term brand or not. And that's really no different than a business, So artists need to really start thinking of themselves as a business. And I think artists are coming from various different backgrounds and experiences, whether they're just getting started on their own or whether they're used to having a whole team of people at a label do everything for them. It's still, at the end of the day, you are a business, you are a brand, and it's important to get really clear on your terms, because you can't just do what what everyone else says you should do, because everyone has a different piece of advice, and I think it's good to keep tabs on what people have to say, but nothing is really gospel at the end of the day, and you really need to decide what works for you. And organization is such a huge part of that, and thinking forward and being really clear about what it is you really want from your own music career. Now, the exciting part of all this, I think, is that now more than ever, artists have the opportunity to really reach exactly the people that they want to reach, exactly the type of people that they're that are going to respond the most to what they're doing. And in turn, that gives artists more of an opportunity to do exactly what they want to do artistically, and not necessarily feel like they have to sell out in order to get any attention. And I know that the term sell out is, that's, how do you even really define that these days? But, I think that it's really easy to get caught up in what we feel like we should be doing versus what we really want to be doing. And is that really going to make us happy at the end of the day? So I think it's really a good time to recalibrate for a lot of artists.
Okay, and what does that recalibration look like? Can you give us sort of just your perspective, your opinion, based on the musicians you work with and your own experience? What does I'd like to sort of give musicians a working model of what it looks like to be a professional musician in 2013. So, from your perspective, what do you see? Is it a combination of touring, CD sales, licensing? Can you sort of break down what you see working?
I think that's absolutely a good. I think that's a good combination right there. I think that it really depends on, again, what exactly do you want? What do you want to accomplish? Do you want to be the type of artist that is conquering the world, and is touring really important to you? If touring is really important to you, then that should be your primary goal and your biggest priority, and your entire, the next year's worth of plans should be really mapped out in advance, and really evolve around the priority of touring. Yeah. And having those, projected goals or deadlines, creating those goals and deadlines, and having those projected goals and deadlines really dictate what you do, and working back from there, and really figuring out ways to make that work, because that's going to feed your soul at the end of the day, and hopefully feed your wallet. And that's if that's going to resonate the most with you at an emotional level, or at your core level, that's what's going to resonate most with the people that will respond to that. I think, I think that's a huge part of it. So I really think it's this all-encompassing look and approach to career development that I think a lot of artists don't really think about. So I think it's a lot more important these days to really look inward and get real with yourself, and take the time up front to do the dirty work, if you will, or rather the tedious work to figure out, where am I at? What have I really loved so far? What really has made me happy so far? What has made me miserable? What are the things I want to eliminate? Or are you an artist that needs more balance in life? Do you need more of an even balance of music and touring, but also more time in your personal life, more time to just have a life, or perhaps you have a day job, perhaps you have a family that you're neglecting because you're spending too much time on your music career. So I really think that it all comes down to who you are, where you're at, and what you really want to move forward. And I think that in itself can really transform a lot of artists' perspectives. You know, a lot of times I've worked with artists that have been just on the edge and ready to quit because they've been so bogged down in their own frustration. But introducing some of these other approaches has really opened up their minds, you know, and completely changed their perspective. So I think it's time for a radical perspective shift, and for a lot of artists, and I think that in itself can really transform everything, and really make things help things work out, you know, and redefine artists' definition of their own success.
Now, in terms of your own music career, Gregory, do you still perform in the Burlington area? Do you still tour regionally? What is your own music career? What does that look like these days?
Yeah, I am touring more regionally, and I'm being a little bit more selective than I was before. My own personal story, I think, is a good example of everything we're talking about, because I really was the type of artist that was trying to conquer the world, and I made touring my priority. I also made crowdfunding my priority, and I was of the tribe of artists that was kind of pre-Kickstarter and Pledge Music, doing it manually. And, you know, the combination of those two things really helped me sustain myself for over a decade. And I really was doing it, and I was really enjoying it, and I was making money, and you know, but then my priorities changed, and I think
Sure.
that's a really good example, because we don't all stay the same. We grow and we change, and our desires and our priorities change.
Sure.
And that's why it's so important, I think, really even annually to go through the work at the tail end of the year to set the stage for a new year and map out the next year based on where you're at. And for me, I think that, you know, I reached that point and I realized that touring was no longer the primary priority for me.
Yeah.
And I wanted more of that balance. And that really helped me kind of step back from the edge. You know, I was feeling pretty frustrated at that point in life, feeling like, you know, I'm not enjoying performing so much anymore because I'm making it, putting too much pressure on it. It started to feel a lot more like a job, than it was fun. So I needed to take a step back. I needed to give myself the opportunity to miss it and be more selective with the type of shows that I enjoy playing, type of venues. And it is really nice to be here in the Northeast because everything is relatively close. So it's fairly easy to linger here and still be touring and playing fairly often. Yeah. I do miss other parts of the country, and I would like to get back there soon, but it's nice to be in that position where every show is just really enjoyable again. And, you know, really, it's nice to miss the rest of the country right now. So it gives me all the more motivation to figure that out in the new year.
No, you make a really interesting point, because I think a lot of musicians start out, you know, sort of starry-eyed and with dreams of conquering the world and making it big. And the reality is, for most musicians, that to even get close to that being a reality, it takes a long time, right? It takes years in most cases. And oftentimes our priorities do change, you know, and maybe in our 20s, what looked fun and exciting when we're in our 30s doesn't, right? So I think I can totally relate to that. I mean, I'm 39, I'll be 40 next year, so I've definitely... I love playing music, and I've probably played more gigs this year than I ever have, but they've all been locally and regionally. So I've you know, the idea of hopping on a bus and traveling around the country doesn't seem as exciting as it used to, but I still love playing music. I probably love playing live more than ever. So I think it's about setting up a lifestyle, you know, that works for your own situation, whatever that is.
Yeah, absolutely. That's awesome to hear. That's very inspiring to hear.
Which part?
That you know, you're at a point now where you are also being very conscious about your own lifestyle, and you therefore are playing. It's perhaps even almost ironic that you're playing more shows than you ever have, and most of them are locally, but you're very happy with that, you know. And it really comes down to being aware and being conscious, and making those changes consciously. And you know, when you're happy in your life, when you're doing what you need to do to be happy in your life, that's when everything just, you know, it just transcends everything in your life.
Things work better, right? Things flow better when you're not overly stressed. You know, at least in my experience, that's what I've found. So it's an ongoing process, right, of finding this balance. This, you know, I have my website, obviously, that I run. I focus a lot of my time on music. So it's not always easy to juggle, but I love where I'm at, and I also feel optimistic about moving forward. Now, in your own case, do you look at music as something you want to keep? Are you looking to grow your music career? Are you happy where you at? What is your sort of long-term goals?
I would say both, you know, and it's funny that you mentioned that, because I would say that because I'm happy where I'm at right now, I think that I'm giving myself the opportunity for a lot more growth than I've seen in a while. You know, it's really easy to get stuck in a dark place, or a place of frustration where you feel stagnancy, and in a sense, you're almost creating more of that stagnancy, you know, because that's all you're focusing on. And, you know, I'm a big believer of that. So I think that everything that I have subscribed to in life, I have developed based on observing patterns. And I think that in observing anyone that really has experienced a great deal of success, at least by my own definitions, people that I've looked up to, the pattern has always been that these people are uninhibitedly themselves, you know, creatively, and doing exactly what they want, exactly on their own terms, and thrilled to be doing it every time. You know, it's just, and when that's the case, it's very magnetic and it's infectious. So I can't help but look up to them, just like presumably everyone else in their circle that looks up to them and is supporting them in their music and their own career dreams. And you know, I think that there's a huge lesson in that, and that's definitely been the case for me. So I think that the more I can do to get to a good place and really enjoy what I'm doing, the more I'm helping the growth and evolution and success of my own career path across the board.
Nice. Well, let's do this, Gregory. Let's shift focus just a little bit. I wanted to get back to talking about your website, which again is thecreativeadvisor.com. And you've put together. How long have you had this site, by the way?
Not too long, just since the beginning of 2012.
Okay, so a couple years. It looks great. I mean, I'm perusing your site. You have videos and interviews, and it looks like a lot of really good resources. Is there anything, I want to sort of give musicians some tangible advice to the extent that we can. I know everybody's careers are different and everybody has sort of a different path they're on, but can you talk about some different ways musicians can promote themselves? I know you have videos about YouTube and a lot of different resources. Is there anything in particular we can kind of dive into?
Absolutely. I mean, I think there are so many ways, you know, depending on exactly what an artist is trying to accomplish. I know that I've been talking a lot about YouTube and video in general. That's been a big area of interest from a lot of other artists that I've noticed. So I've tried to serve up different suggestions on how artists can promote themselves in various ways, just through really taking full advantage of YouTube. Considering YouTube is probably still the second largest search engine out there, when you really think of it in terms of a search engine versus just a place to peruse videos. That can be a really exciting and powerful thing for artists to take advantage of. And I still think that there are quite a few artists not taking advantage of it yet. I know that in my own personal experience, I've generated tons of exposure, probably the most amount of exposure online via YouTube. And, I've taken all sorts of different approaches through YouTube. I think, all of them have been effective, some more than others. And you never really know what's going to come of that. In my case, I did a cover of an Adele song right when her last album came out, so I did it really early on. And this was before anyone would have anticipated what a huge hit that album would have been. So particularly one song, Set Fire to the Rain, that's the song that I decided to do. And I generated so much exposure just from that one song that, that really was a huge opportunity for me. So I think that opportunities like that can really open so many doors. You just never know.
How many views did that video, did that cover of the Adele song get?
Yeah, it's over 400,000 views at this point.
Wow.
Yeah, and it was, really just a great way to sell music and gain more fans, and a great opportunity to launch other potential opportunities. And I think that YouTube in itself can be a huge thing that a lot of artists can capitalize on still.
Sure. What was there?
Yeah.
Sorry, not to cut you off, but was there anything in particular that you did that you think resulted in getting so many views, or do you think it was just timing, luck?
I think it was all the above. I think that I did my best to optimize the video. I made sure to add all the right metadata information in the title and the description. I made sure to add all of my links in the description, anything that anyone might be interested in, annotations in the video, and all the right tags and things like that. But I also video responded to one of Adele's live videos, and it took me a little time to find a video that I not only thought would be a good video to pair it with, but also one that kind of automatically accepted my video response, because a lot of times it's set up where people have to
manually review them. Yeah,
exactly. And a lot of times those people don't even realize that they have to do that, so your video will probably never be accepted as a video response. But anyway, it definitely took some time initially, but obviously it was really worth the effort, and I never would have anticipated how worth it would have been. So I think the lesson is that it really is worth the upfront effort. But there's so much you can do as an artist. It's like, who has the time to do everything?
Yeah.
Which is why it's all the more important to really be honing in and focusing on what's really your priority and what's really going to be worth the effort for you.
I find that personally to be my biggest struggle. If I were to be completely honest and candid, is just finding the time to do all these things, right?
Right.
In my own case, I have my website that I run. every day, which sustains me for the most part. I also gig 3 to 4 nights a week, usually, sometimes more. There's only so many hours in a day, so that's kind of what I struggle with. Is I have all these great ideas that, I implement a lot of them, but a lot of things just kind of stay on my list of things to do perpetually. So, any advice in terms of? I mean, I guess it just comes down to time management and prioritizing your schedule.
Absolutely. And I think that, that's a challenge, especially for a creative person, because we are full of ideas all the time. And, it's like when you think of a good idea, you're like, oh man, that would be so fun to do, or whatever. But taking the extra step and doing the work to figure out, is this really a priority for me? Or is it going to be worth more of my time and efforts to focus even more, whatever, into what's already working for me and what's already a priority or what's already financially rewarding or whatever. I think that any idea, as exciting as it might be in the honeymoon period, could potentially be a money-making idea, or could potentially be a really fun and exciting idea, but really, at the end of the day, is what's more worthwhile. Yeah.
Well, and I think that's sort of the challenge in general as an aspiring musician, or as a professional musician who's trying to move forward. Let's frame it that way. That a lot of the choices, a lot of the things we can do that will potentially move us forward, there's no certainty, that by doing them it will have the result that we want. So I think that's what makes the music business, different from a lot of businesses where, let's face it, trying to make a living as a musician is sort of a gamble in the first place. And there is a lot of luck and sort of right place, right time, for a lot of these things working out. Would you agree?
Exactly. And I think that all the more reason to be really clear on everything, because, for example, if you're doing a YouTube video and your expectation of that YouTube video, let's take the Adele cover as an example. If I wanted to do an Adele cover and my expectation was for that to go viral and for that to be a big hit, and then that didn't happen, I would probably just feel disappointed. Right. But if the game plan was more the priority is to really leverage YouTube and really that's my game plan for the year, and that's my priority, that's what I'm concentrating most of my effort on, then suddenly it makes everything feel like a part of a grander plan. So you do so many videos, and if one of them doesn't become viral or whatever, then you're not going to feel disappointed. You're going to feel really proud that this is a part of the bigger picture, and I think that's a huge help.
Yeah, no, that makes sense, and it actually reminds me of something that I wrote maybe a couple years ago at this point. But I wrote a blog post about how when you set goals, you should set goals based on things you can actually control. So you can't control necessarily how many views your YouTube video ultimately gets, but you can set a goal to make the video in the first place, right? And do as good of a job as you can. So those are the things that are in your control. And then a lot of it is we put our music and our creative efforts out there, and ultimately people decide, how popular or not popular it becomes.
Yeah, totally. I love that.
Yeah, I forgot that I wrote that, but now that I think of it, that's pretty good advice, right? I mean, there's only so much we can really control at the end of the day.
Exactly, and this is a job that has to remain fun, or else it's not worth the effort, Yeah. So it's sacred territory. I think it's safe to say that every musician would agree that it is sacred territory. So we have to keep it that way, and however we need to do that is what we need to do.
Yep. Exactly. So what was the what was the net result of getting 400,000 views on YouTube? Did that result in more CD sales or music downloads, or what came about as a result?
It did. It resulted in more sales in general. It resulted in a lot of Facebook friends and followers and Twitter followers and mailing list signups. And, while it's hard to track exactly who's coming from where, there was a noticeable surge of interest in general. People would think I received even clients that way.
Yeah.
And people reaching out, asking to collaborate, people, potentially even some gig opportunities, but again, I'm never really sure. I always try to ask, how did you first hear of me? But I've definitely played shows, even college shows, where kids have requested that song, so it's definitely opened up a lot of doors across the board. And I think that's just kind of almost a worst case scenario of taking an approach like that, because then there are artists like Justin Bieber and whoever else where taking the YouTube approach has completely catapulted their careers.
Yeah.
So really there's so much potential there.
Yeah, absolutely. I saw on your website, by the way, I wanted to ask you, I saw on your website that you've been featured on NPR, MTV, Sirius. Was that for your music, or was that for your the Creative Advisor website? What was that for?
That was mostly for my music. Yes.
Nice.
Yeah, and it's nice to see in retrospect. It's nice to look at that and really see the whole 10,000. I don't know if you've heard about the whole 10,000 hours.
Sure, absolutely, the 10,000 hour
mantra.
Rule.
Yeah, exactly. I love that, and I felt like, particularly NPR, that was on my bucket list, and literally 10 years into my career is when that happened. So
nice.
That really was a really cool, monumental moment to, and made it really all feel worthwhile. But I also feel like, along with the 10,000 hour rule, that's really when you have become an expert at what you're doing. And I realized that's kind of how I feel in general. I really have lived this world, even before it became the default, really, or while it was quickly becoming the default. And so it was all the more incentive for me to want to turn this into something productive and helpful for other artists.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Yeah, I love the idea of the 10,000 hour rule. I really resonate with that concept. And going back to like what I was saying, that I've played. I mean, I'm sure I've played more gigs this year than any other year, and I sort of came to this conclusion that I can't really control the outcome of my music career to a large degree. But again, going back to what I can control, I can control how much I play and how much effort I put into it. And so sort of in this phase where I'm trying as much as possible to not even worry about the grand scheme of things and how successful or not successful I become. And I'm just trying to get as good as possible. So there's definitely something to the idea of, I mean, obviously it goes without saying, if you want to become great at anything, you need to put in a lot of hours. So I love the idea of just however you can, like if you're trying to be a performing musician, just get out there and play as much as possible. To a certain extent, things happen. You've got to be in it to win it, right? And you've got to be out there doing it, and that's how you meet people and connect with people and ultimately get good.
Absolutely, that's great advice.
Cool. Well, listen, let's we're at about 45 minutes, and I have another call lined up here in about 10 minutes. So why don't we wrap up, Gregory? I really appreciate you you coming on the podcast today, and I would like to give people your websites so they can learn more about you. We've mentioned the creativeadvisor.com, so if people want to go there and get music business career resources, they can go to the creativeadvisor.com. Do you have a website for your music we can give people as well?
Yeah, thank you. It's GregoryDouglas.com, and there are 2 S's on Douglas, or else you'll get someone else.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gregory Douglas with 2 S's. And one more thing, I like to end each podcast with a song. Is there a song of yours you can send me that I can tag on to the end of this?
Yeah, definitely.
Do you have a particular one in mind so we can tell people what they're going to hear?
Ooh, good question.
Can be any song you want to play.
I'll send you a song called Wild.
Wild.
Which is what I wrote that song after I saw Where the Wild Things Are.
Okay.
And I loved it. I mean, I grew up on the book, obviously, and I loved the film, but I also was thinking in terms of independent artists and kind of like being in the wild. So that might be a good one for this.
Okay, excellent. So we'll close with a song by Gregory Douglas. This is called Wild. And Gregory, thanks again for doing this. We'll talk soon.
Thank you so much for having me.
You can see the spark in my eye.